Hello everybody, my name's Chip and like you said, I work at Metro Water Recovery. We were formerly Metro Wastewater Reclamation District. We service the Denver metro area. Our service area is pretty large. It's approximately 715 square miles all around the Denver metro area. We now have two plants. We have one that services most of the Denver metro area, and then we have a newer plant that's farther north, and they service, if you're familiar with Colorado, Brighton and Thornton, Colorado. Combined, we get about 137 million gallons of water a day, about 132 million gallons from the Denver plant, and another 5 million at our smaller plant up north. We generate about 90 dry tons of biosolids a day. We have a 52,000 acre ranch in eastern Colorado, and about 35% of our biosolids go to that ranch, and the other 65% go to like private farmers that are out east. We generate about 4 megawatts of electricity per day, and that's able to run about 40% of the facilities at our treatment plants. Currently, we have about 420 employees, 230 miles worth of interceptors we have to service. Pre-treatment-wise, we probably have around 10,000-ish active IUs, and probably always around 100 permitted or 100 permitted folks. We have around 47 SIU CIUs, and then about another 60 or so zero dischargers. We don't do any permitting currently with our typical IUs, but we're going to talk about that a little bit, some of the things we're doing with specifically the colored sector. So that's about it for just generally. I wanted to give you a little background about who Metro is. So we titled this presentation, The Colored Wastewater Generator Sector. And we're not talking about the typical colored wastewater that we all see every day. We're talking about when you get an unusual observation or unusual colors flowing into your plant. We've had a problem with that for about 4 years now, and I'll get into that a little bit. So we're going to talk to you about the what, the why, the when, the who, and the how of what we've titled the colored wastewater sector, and I'll tell you what that means here in a second. So, what is the colored wastewater generator sector? So we've defined them as folks that work with highly colored materials. So think of folks like printers, paint manufacturers, chemical manufacturers, folks like that that have a potential to discharge something to your service area that's highly colored. We've seen colored wastewater at our headworks quite a few times. Over the past 4 years, we've either had 13 or 14 events that we've captured or that we've actually seen. I'll show you a picture of that in a minute. Luckily, lately for us, that's slowed down a bit. I think since we started this program, maybe it's just luck, I'm going to knock on wood, that has slowed down for us, so that's a good thing. Why is controlling this important? Well, obviously we don't want to discharge colored wastewater back into the Platte River. We don't want to cause pass-through interference at our plant, and it's a bad thing when people are discharging a lot of colored material that they shouldn't be. I talked a little bit about who has the potential. We'll talk a little bit more. And then lastly, we're going to talk about how can we control this sector. And what we've kind of come up with is some best management practices for this sector. And then we've also talked about potentially incorporating a general permit for this sector. We haven't done that yet, but that's probably going to be our next step. And I forgot to introduce Meg Parker. She's a co-investigator, and she's going to present the second half of this. Okay, so I've talked about this a little bit. And oh, by the way, all the pictures you're going to see, all these beautiful colored pictures, these all came from inspections that Meg and I did back in 2020. So these are actual inspection photographs. So we tried to find the ones with the most color. What is the colored wastewater generator sector? So the way we've defined them, and I don't know if everybody uses the term sector. To us, when I say sector, we're talking about the colored sector, for example. We also have like a brewery sector, a hospital sector, a lab sector. But for today, the colored sector are folks like printers, paper and cardboard manufacturers, paint, ink, dye, and colored powder manufacturers. We have a colored powder manufacturer that's like in Lakewood, Colorado. They make like those colored powders for like color runs and color celebrations. And we thought we had our culprit when we went to that business, because the guy actually said, oh yeah, we rinse out all of our vats and we wash it down the drain. So we thought that was the person that was doing it, but turned out not to be, unfortunately. Chemical and cleaning supply manufacturers, and like I said, similar processes that generate colored wastewater. This picture is from a label manufacturer. They make all kinds of different labels, and they also made like plastic bags for like pet food products. And they had this really super nice printer that used these 5-gallon buckets of ink to apply the ink to these plastic bags. So this is the headworks of our plant, and you could see that's not the typical color that water coming into your plant should be. So we have like a bright red event and a bright green event. Like I said, we've had 14, we call these unusual observations. 13 of them have been color related, and we actually had one that was foam related. There was a company in Denver that made, I think it's Prel shampoo. Is that right, John? Was it Prel or Pert? And they decided one day that they were going to clean out one of their off-spec vats of shampoo. So they decided not to put any defoamer in it, and they just dumped it down the drain. So there was a foam trail from their building, which is probably, I don't know, 5 or 10 miles from our plant, all the way to our plant. Our whole plant foamed up. We were able to track that one back. It was pretty easy to find foam coming out of manholes all the way back to this place. But unfortunately, to date, we have never been able to track back one of these colored discharges. So, in our service area, or in our program, I guess, we use a database. It's called a PIMS database. And we have 180 different business types, anywhere from like warehouses to auto body shops and everywhere in between. And from those 180 business types, we determined that 26 of those have the potential to discharge colored wastewater. So we took those 26 business types, like I said, printers, cardboard manufacturers, paint manufacturers, that type of thing. And when we pulled the numbers, we actually have 510 individual businesses that fall into that, I guess, definition. Of the 510, 366 of them were printers, paperboard and paper, soap and detergent, or sign manufacturers. So those are who we started inspecting first. And in this picture, I don't know if you can tell, that top picture, that's actually Meg standing next to a giant container of ink. This is at a place called Publication Printers in South Denver. They make magazines, and they ship them all over the world. And that's the size of containers their ink comes in. And then below, this is at a label manufacturer, and that's just how they store their ink for all the different labels that they make. So you can kind of see there's a range on what size containers people use to store their inks there. So we started inspecting these folks back in August of 2020. COVID kind of relaxed a little bit for us. We were able to come back to work, had to wear masks, and Meg and I started going out and inspecting these folks. And to date, we've done probably about 110 inspections since August of 2020. In 2020, when we started, we did what we call a full facility characterization inspection, where we looked at everything. We made them give us process flow diagrams, all their facility diagrams that showed all their plumbing. We went kind of top to bottom through these. We wanted to know everything we could know about printing, because we're not experts in printing. There are so many different types of printers, so many different types of printing presses. So we really did a full court press and just got as much information as we could. And that kind of helped us decide how we were going to move forward in 2021 with these inspections. We also did 13 limited inspections, and a limited inspection for us is we had a colored influent come into our headworks, And we just quickly put together 2 teams. We figured out that there are about 13 businesses on this line that could have potentially discharged this color. And we just went out and quickly did like a quick inspection of those places and asked them, hey, did you guys have a spill today? Did any upset conditions? Did you potentially discharge this colored wastewater to us? And we didn't find anything. And starting in 2021, we created a color-specific inspection form. It's a PDF fillable form, so it's super nice, super easy. We zeroed in on the exact questions we wanted to ask these folks, and we were able to crank out 80 plus of those inspections so far. And they go really smoothly and a lot quicker for us. And this is another type of printing press with some really cool yellow ink. So how can we control discharges from this sector? So I have a slide here that shows what our current process, or what our process was, I guess. So the top box there, we used to call our questionnaires industrial waste questionnaires. We've recently changed their names to waste discharge information forms, because I think when we use the term questionnaire, it kind of like sounds like it's an option, that we're just asking you we want to ask you some questions, and we had a really poor return rate on questionnaires. So we changed the name. I don't know if it's increased. Meg might know if they've, no. So the first step for us is we'd always get a questionnaire back, and if let's say this business was a possible waste generator, if the answer is yes, we would do an inspection. If they rinsed, washed equipment, that type of thing, they would become a candidate for a BMP. If the answer is no, they didn't work with color, they would just continue to be tracked in our database. If they didn't rinse, but they generated waste ink, dyes, paints, or powders, they collected them in some kind of container and had them hauled off, they also became a BMP candidate. If they didn't, the last thing we would ask is if they stored ink, dyes, or paints. And if they answered no, again, they would just continue to be tracked in our database. But if the answer was yes, they became a BMP candidate. So once you become a BMP candidate, we sat down and we developed a list of BMPs that we thought made sense. Meg and I did a bunch of research on the whole printer industry, on what type of BMPs they're already being told by their manufacturers to do for their ink storage and how to get rid of their used inks and that type of thing. And then we reached out pretty much to the whole country and asked other POTWs what they're doing to manage their colored wastewater discharge folks. And then we put together a short list of BMPs that made sense to us. We had to come up with a BMP rationale document. We had to run that by our managers. Once they bought into it, then we came up with just a specific list of BMPs. So if you were one of those 3 folks, if you had colored waste coming from your facility, if you rinsed, washed, cleaned any type of equipment that could potentially discharge color, if you generated ink waste or paint waste or chemical waste that were highly colored, you kind of fell into this group for us. And what our next step in the process we're thinking is for folks that just don't want to play nice and don't want to do the BMPs that we've asked them to do, we're thinking about requiring them to actually be permitted using a general permit. And we're still kind of working that out, but general permits are basically a permit that you can apply to an entire sector that has a similar type of discharge. So you don't have to, I guess, customize these for every business. So we think this might be an easy solution, or a solution that won't require a lot of manpower. So that's the next step. And we're thinking some of our cardboard manufacturers may fall into this because they, I don't know if you guys have ever been to a cardboard manufacturer. They generate a lot of waste ink. We have some pizza box manufacturers and other box manufacturers, And when we did the inspection, they just basically had these grates on the ground, and when a bucket of ink was like, had this much ink left in it, they would just turn the bucket over onto the grate and just let all that ink paint just run out through the grates directly to the sanitary sewer. So, I mean, these grates were just, I think I have a picture of them, they were just completely covered with ink, and there was a really bad thing. And when we've approached them about the BMPs, they're like, why? Why now? Why do we need to do this? We've been discharging like this for years, and it doesn't feel like they're going to want to play, so they might have to go directly to the general permit route. Okay, so far, like I said earlier, we have inspected 100 plus of folks. And just to give you an idea of where we are right now, a little more than 60 of those will not require any type of BMP packet. They either they don't discharge ink, they already have a waste plan in place, they don't have any floor drains, they're just not a real candidate to discharge ink. So that's a good thing. 36 of them will be required to complete our BMP packet. Back in July, we mailed 24 to these folks, and they had 60 days to come into compliance. And that 60 days ended September 30th. And so far, we've only gotten back 18 of the 24. 18 of the 24 are in full compliance. There's another 6 that we're dealing with right now. We recently mailed out 12 more, and so far those 12, we've gotten 1 back. And then the 13 that we did a limited inspection on, we're going to do a more elaborate inspection for those folks, and we'll decide which category they fall into. So that's kind of where we are right now with the program, and I'm going to turn this over to Meg, and she's going to talk about some of the specifics, like what gives us our legal authority to do this, how this works into our rules and regulations. She's going to talk a little bit about the BMPs, what they look like, how they're structured. We came up with some really cool checklists to help the industries to quickly go through and see if they are actually complying with the BMPs. We tried to make this easy on them. We also put together a webinar and held like a little webinar with them for anybody that was interested, and kind of just explained why we were doing this. So Meg's going to talk a little bit more about that.
So what gives us the legal authority to do all of this? When we were creating and talking about what this would look like, the first piece of the puzzle was looking into our rules and regs. And here are some bullet points from section 6.16 of our rules and regs that tell us that we can establish a BMP program. So we have the authority to establish a BMP program to control color, and we can require industrial users to install these BMPs if they're physical or follow housekeeping SOPs. The next section of our rules and regs was 6.25, and this allows us to require industries to submit information like a checklist that we're requiring them to submit, as well as just maintain compliance with the rules and regs, as well as the BMPs that we're setting forth. So after looking at our rules and regs, we outlined a BMP rationale. Like Chip said, we wanted to make it as easy as possible for these industries to know why we were doing this. And so the folks that use paint, they oftentimes use solvents and other flammable materials at their facilities. So the BMPs don't only cover color, they cover everything that could happen at these facilities. And this rationale is neatly listed point by point for each section of our rules and regs that they would apply to. So this is the first piece of the packet that we mailed to the industries that Chip spoke about. And the next piece of this packet, sorry, it's tough to read. This is the first control mechanism. This is the actual BMP. And the BMP is organized into recommended and required BMPs. And it's also organized into physical structures and engineering controls they would install. The next level is housekeeping. The next level is admin controls. So this is the same line by line as our rationale. And the next control mechanism that we briefly touched on is this general permit. So any industry that does not comply with the BMPs would be a general permit candidate. We spoke about these box manufacturers, they're looking likely, but really anybody that doesn't comply. And we're working on this general permit now. We got input from our existing ZD permit as well as general permits that other POTWs are using around the country. So that's the second control mechanism. And then the next piece to the packet is the BMP checklist. So this is mailed to the industry. They know exactly what the inspectors will be looking at as we're walking through. Each box refers to a section of the actual BMP, really cleanly laid out. And this checklist, is what our inspectors are using walking in. This really is a nice component to the fillable form. So this is the last piece of the BMP packet. Chip has really taken full control in making this as awesome and user-friendly as possible for all the inspectors. We're trying to move towards more electronic forms as a program, and we're learning a lot about PDF, which is great. So this fillable form allowed Chip to do over 100 inspections. It's definitely an easy tool to use. And so that kind of rounds out the BMP packet. And kind of going back to why we're doing this in the first place, these two different flow diagrams, the one on the right kind of outlines what we had been doing. We had our lab department and our operations department and pre-treatment program kind of all working a little bit in silo to figure out what this is, what the color, where the color is coming from, and as a result, that red box says, to date, we haven't been able to determine where the unusual observations are coming from. So it hasn't been working, which is why we've shifted over to this flow diagram on the left, which is a really intentional program identifying who could be contributing. So when another unusual observation does happen, we're just so much further along at identifying who it could be. And the green box at the bottom, the goals of this whole program is educating the sector. A lot of these folks did not know that what they were doing is against rules and regs, prohibited. And we really want, there's so many industries that could be falling into this sector, so we want to educate them. We also want them to be accountable of what they're discharging to us. Metro is in a unique situation where all of the industries pay our connectors, the municipalities. They don't often know who we are. So we want to show our face, and we want them to know we treat this wastewater and just set this level of accountability that we believe this BMP program is doing. And establish a control mechanism. We haven't done a BMP control mechanism to this level, I guess. The dental sector. There's a little bit more teeth behind that. So this is our next go at it. So we're excited. We believe that we're moving in the right direction with this. And Chip touched on a lot of what we've been implementing. This is over a year in the works. We've done inspections and follow-up inspections, follow-up letters, sending out BMP requirements. A big part of this was understanding what Metro's resources, current and future, are to this program. I mean, it's 100+ inspections. It's a massive industry. So we're still working through, if this works well, what other sector are we moving to next? There's a lot of programs that could be controlled this way. We've met with different departments at Metro, and we want everyone to understand what our intentions are, because they spread the word to our connectors and the industries maybe in a different way. We created a webinar. Chip put that on. I'm sure he'll put it on again soon for the new industries. Our website has been updated. We're trying to get all of this pre-treatment information right there on our website. So when a new color industry comes online, or maybe they hear about this BMP, they don't have to reach out. They can just look, and the information is all available, including the webinar on our website. And we have a lot of other ideas on how to grow this. But yeah, it's ongoing. We're excited, and we believe, hopefully, when the next unusual observation happens, if it does happen, that we're in a way better situation to catch it. So yeah, we'd like to hear from anybody who maybe has had color at their headworks or just has anything to say about this.